Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Season 2 premiere of Mob Psycho. Great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, our first thing starts off with Regan taking on a case where, like, basically a farmer's entire field is kind of cursed and the crops are dying and he can't really get a harvest. So initially it seems like the spirit's just in a scarecrow and Mob easily destroys it, but then it turns out it's called, was it Wriggle Wriggle? Is this evil spirit that was like living, like it rises up from the soil and attacks them. But no matter how much Mob like fights off its roots, it kind of has an endless amount of roots. So Mob ends up getting dragged underground, and he's thinking like, right, this evil spirit is basically communicating and controlling the plants, and he's like, I wonder if I could do that. So using his powers, he communicates with the plants, and he ends up gaining control over them and ends up destroying the evil spirit's head. I mean, it was basically, it makes like a giant body for itself, and Mob then kind of forms the plants into a giant body for himself as well. I almost thought it was almost going to be like a giant plant-based mech battle, but it wasn't. It kind of went that way, but yeah, Mob ends up winning. There is no actual true payment because the guy doesn't have a lot of money, and so Regan accepted like, hey, all right, the payment's going to be 30% of your crops. And so they ended up getting some seeds and some tools and fertilizer. And because Mob's got a new skill set of, hey, let me control living things, he talks to the plants, and the cherry tomatoes immediately grow, but Regan doesn't even want them because he says they're terrible. I'm wondering, is that a byproduct of, like, because Mob uses powers, or is it just like the tomatoes just suck? But it's kind of like, cool. So, his payment this time, because there was no money, was broccoli seeds. So it's like, yeah, glad to see nothing's changed with you, Regan. I don't know, I wasn't expecting anything to, but I love also picking up with Masato. Turns out she's connected to that cult. Was it the Helmet Psycho religion? Basically the remnants of Dimple's cult. And now, like, obviously they had continued that a little bit, that they were still out there looking for Mob, but her being there, her main reason for being there is she's trying to throw them off of Mob's scent, because she's like, right, I'm the only person that's actually seen what he looks like up close. I'll bring him towards you if I find him, and I'll be the one to kind of determine whether or not someone is actually the person you're looking for, because apparently this is their 12th meeting. Which I was like, oh, because I started thinking, like, how much time passed by? And it's like, well, it can't be that much time, like maybe a couple days or something, like, since the first season, because Shinji's only now just resigning as student council president. So, like, a lot of that kind of happened later on in the season. So I feel like, right, that must be, like, it must mean only been, like, a couple days or something since season 1's finale. But either way, Masato's reason for doing that is because she believes Mob isn't ready to. So it's so interesting, I guess, because she's taken such an interest in Mob, and she wants him to basically rule over this cult, but it's like his personality is not suitable for that as a cult leader. So she's like, right, I need him to grow up more. It's like, but how do I put him in a position to grow? And with Shinji stepping down from his student council position, she wants Mob to run for student council, and she's able to manipulate him into doing it by being like, oh, you're into Tsubomi, who's like the idol of this school. But it's like, well, Bomb wasn't even, I called him Bomb, sorry, Mob, pulling Bomb from Tower of God. What was I about to say? I think I was about to say Tsubasa, so I was like, was I about to say Tsubasa or Zora Chronicles? Jesus. Either way, Bomb is the main character from Tower of God. I think that's where, like, why I pulled the name Bomb instead of Mob. But Mob didn't even know about Tsubomi being kind of this, like, idol in the school. For him, it's just like, right, I've, like, been friends with her before, and I have a massive crush on her, and I really like her. And Masato was like, huh, you're from two different, like, hierarchies, like, so it's kind of interesting for you to be friends. But it's like, hey, you become student council president, and it will make it a lot easier to shorten that gap between you. So they spend the next week, he goes through hardcore training, which I love some of that hardcore training. Like, especially him underneath the waterfall. That was literally in the recap episode with Regan when he's writing his book. Mob is ghostwriting his book for him. But it's just interesting because it's like, yeah, that was part of his like intense training, and you know, it's time for him to do his thing. Which, interesting enough, he goes after Shinji because Shinji is actually, you know, it's like, right, I resigned, but I'm going back up there because the vice president of the student council told him, like, right, you need to go back up there because, like, resigning is just you running away. You're not facing the consequences. So it's like, right, try running again, and when you do, try to make up for the mistakes by don't run away anymore. And when Mob gets on stage, even though they practiced it, Masato was like, I wrote his speech. Mob stood up there for 5 minutes and said absolutely nothing, and he crashes out because of it. The like Body Improvement Club, it's like, oh man, this hit him hard. It's like, yes, because for him, he felt like this was his Hail Mary to get closer to Tsubomi, and that just kind of, for him, it's just like, oh, I practically shot myself in the foot. That's not going to happen now. But a girl named Emi shows up and is like, yo, like, I liked what you did up there and had the courage to do that, so I want to go out with you. And literally everyone's reaction is, wait, like, initially he's like, oh, I got the Body Improvement Club, and Musashi's like, nope, go. And everyone's kind of proud of him, but everyone in his actual club that he was in beforehand, I actually forgot what they are. Oh, the Telepathy Club, or I think the Telepathy Club. And everyone in there's like, wait, does Mob have a girlfriend now? How did that happen? I'm so envious. Yeah, so I thought that was really sweet and interesting. And, you know, he was walking her home at one point in time. But then, like, I thought was interesting when he got home, he immediately went back to school because Dimple's like, oh, you're just getting here. What happened? And it's like, oh, did you finally quit the club? And he was like, no, I'm about to go back to school. I'm like, what? You came all the way home? Why are you going back? I didn't get that, but we got an answer to that later. But yeah, but for the next week, he's been hanging out with Emi, and he's been in higher spirits when he shows up for work with Regan. Regan's like, oh, you're kind of more into this than usual. He's like, yep. He's like, well, you got a girlfriend? He's like, I'm just kidding. No way that would happen. And then Mob immediately kind of sneaks off. They notice that he's eating more at you know, at lunch, and at home for dinner. And Ritsu's happy because Ritsu's like, oh man, I thought my brother would be shattered after that whole debacle, but it's like, no, it seems like he's in good spirits, and that's all he's happy about. So, but yeah, it just seems like overall Mob is doing good, but the problem is, like, Emi, it's not even, they were never really officially dating because it turns out Mob actually never accepted her, like, date. I mean, it makes sense because it's like, right, I don't really know you, and the person who has his heart is Tsubomi, so it's like, it makes sense. And I'm sure he didn't bring that up to Emi, but it turns out, sadly, Emi only went out with him because she's exactly like Mob. She's not very good at, like, talking about her feelings. And for her, it's like, that's the issue. It's like, Mob, she's like, I don't actually know what you're feeling because you don't really talk about it. You kind of just, she's like, even you going up there trying to become student council president is only because someone else told you. And it's like, yes, Masato, like, convinced him to do it. And she's like, yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. It turns out she asked out Mob because it was a rock, paper, scissors dare between her and her friends, and she lost, so she had to. And she felt guilty because she was like, right, I've been lying to you for this past week. So, I mean, because he had read her book and he was like, oh, there's a lot of big words. And it's just, once again, Mob has a hard time struggling, like, to convey what he's feeling and what he's thinking. It's not easy for him. He's an odd duckling in that regard. And the sad thing is, like, after everything went down with Emi, he just sat there on the grass and until, like, evening came, and he was thinking about the time they spent together, that it's like, even though he couldn't put it into words, and even though he couldn't fully express it, because once again, he has a tough time expressing feelings, and we as the audience understand that more than anyone, he actually really enjoyed it. We see the flashbacks of, like, yeah, the time he spent with Emi, he really enjoyed it. And so Emi's with her kind of friends, and they're like joking about the book, and she's like, oh yeah, it's nothing special. I haven't spent a lot of time on it. It's just something I did for shits and giggle. And they rip it up and being like, oh, let's go. And Mob shows up and is like, yo, you shouldn't do that. It's like, yeah, she worked really hard on this. And they're like, what? You said you didn't. She's like, no, I don't. Yeah, it wasn't that big of a deal. But for Mob, it's like, well, if you're not going to take it, I will. And he picks up the pieces. And for him, it's like, I'm trying to be better about explaining, like, or expressing how I'm feeling, and tears are forming in his eyes. And Emi comes over and helps pick them up with him. And she tells her friends, like, no, you guys go on ahead. I'll talk to you later. Like, okay. Because at first I was like, oh, you guys are kind of assholes, aren't you? But it's like, well, because for whatever reason, it's like that was still a dickish thing, but they didn't make much of a deal of it. Like I said, I think like I said, it's very much like Mob, where it's not the easiest to really kind of be forefront with people. There are probably a lot more in common. And I think it won't ever become a romantic thing. It probably will just stay like a, now we're going to be friends type of situation, which, I think Mob could deal with having more friends. He's got a handful of them. But, I mean, prior to this beginning of the series, only like pseudo friends he had was, oh yeah, because he didn't really have any friends really. But like this whole situation, not even becoming a part of the telepathy club, but he's friendly enough with the telepathy club. He's also cool with everyone in the body improvement club. Him and Taruki have become friends in a lot of ways. Obviously, I think him and his brother have a much better relationship than because a lot of stuff was seeding underneath. So there's been a lot of benefits for Mob that he has grown his friendship circle. He does have like Masato, even though she has her ulterior motives. I mean, just like the head of the telepathy club has her ulterior motives. So the only people who don't have ulterior motives when it comes to Mob is, I mean, you can make the argument maybe Emmy going forward won't, but it's like the body improvement club. They're just like, yo, we want to look after our club member. Like, yo, Mob wants to improve, like, we'll help him, They're like the only people, and now Ritsu are the only people in his life who don't have ulterior motives. I think is fascinating. But either way, getting back to it, the wind picks up the pages from Emmy's book, and Mob uses his Esper abilities to bring all the pages back. And he's like, "See, I'm an Esper," because he had lied to her about like, oh, instead of telling her he exercises, well, he works as a exorcist and stuff. It's like, oh, that she'll probably be creeped out by that, so he lied and said he works in a bookstore. But I thought was so interesting about the Emmy and Mob thing was Tsubomi's nearby being like smooth. So I'm like, I wonder, has that changed how Tsubomi, because we don't like, the only instance we've seen like Tsubomi kind of reacts when Mob got on stage for the student council thing. She was like, whoa, Mob-kun? Which I also love the Risu where he was like, yo, I was going to back up Shinji, but now that my brother's running, this changes everything. And it's like, yeah, he's a big fan of his brother. But either way, the only time we've seen Tsubomi kind of react to Mob, typically in flashbacks, is when they were kids and she got bored of his psychic powers. Like, I think Mob has admired her from afar and he hasn't really talked to her. So like, we don't actually know how Tsubomi present day feels about Mob, because for her it's probably like, oh, we're still friends, but like it feels like you never really come talk to me, and I feel like you're trying to avoid me. She probably feels like he's avoiding her rather than she's avoiding him, and it's just kind of like, I mean, I don't know. Maybe they'll kind of explore that. I'm actually really curious to find out if I get the feeling like they don't end up together type of thing. Maybe they will by the end of the series. I don't know. I'm not asking like, oh, I don't want you to spoil that for me whether they do or not. That is just me like just a rhetorical question I'm asking out loud, because I'm like, I'll find out by the time I get to the end of the series. But it's like, I just get the feeling like it's such a coin flip, because I could easily see this being a series where they do get together, and I can also see this being a thing of like, no, they just become friends, or it could easily be a thing of it ends ambiguously like the future is bright, nothing happens, but the future is a situation where they could end up together. I don't know. Not unless he ends up being up with someone else entirely differently, like a Masato, but I don't think that'll happen, but who knows? Hell, for all I know, he might be the leader of a cult by the end of the series, maybe, if that whole religion situation plays out the way Masato was hoping that it does. But, yeah. I love that when he goes back home, Dimple's like, hey, after you showed her powers, she was just like, oh my god, you're so cool and everything, right? And changed her mind about you. But Mob was like, no, like, just because I told her I have psychic powers, like, why would that change her perception of me? But we do see that it's changing the story because we don't know what the original story was that Emmy was writing, but this one now she's shifting it to a middle schooler with psychic abilities. So I also love Dimple being like, yeah, you obviously need me by your side because you got fooled by another fake love letter like you did last season. And he's like, don't worry, I'll be by your side forever. And he's just like, that's gross. And it's just like, poor Dimple's just like, right, you don't ever treat me with respect. And we see all these books that Mob has about, like, trying to talk more and just, like, obviously elements to himself that he's trying to prove upon. So, obviously, like I said, I'm happy to be swinging back into the mob of it all. Just today, at the time of me recording this, I did the Regan OVA, so this is my second step back into mob officially. But yeah, I'm excited to continue this season and see where it goes. I'm not gonna lie to you, I missed the first opening because it's such a like banger, dude. And I was happy to get to hear it like one last time when it came to the OVA, because it was at the front of the OVA as well. But either way, I'm excited to see where this season ends up taking us. A lot of interesting stuff we do see in this intro, and I'm assuming a lot of that's like more claw related stuff, because it seems like they are going to be the continuous main antagonists of this series. But I also saw some familiar faces amongst the people there, so some of like the 7th Division people, which I'm curious to see what role they play this season. But yeah, excited to have more mob and continue down this road. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.